and hit record. I'm so excited to have Shonda here today, so we'll wait just a few more minutes for those who are coming in. And while you are arriving, I invite you to use this as an opportunity to arrive. So what does that mean? Take a deep breath. You're here. You've made it to the end of the day almost. I know we actually have people who are part of the retreat from literally all over the world. So it's end of the day for us, but the moment, but it might be the beginning of the day. I know we've got people in Bali and Bermuda, just to name a few. So there's really a world community of those who are tuning in.
Very cool.
But it's all an invitation to arrive and be present. So, well, I'll keep adding more people in as they join, but Shonda, why don't you and I get started? So welcome to day 2 of the Journey Forward virtual retreat. If you've been tuning in, then you're kind of getting the rhythm and cadence that we have our morning meditations, intention setting, a little bit of a journal prompt. Hopefully you're taking the space to engage, right? It's so much more than just showing up. It's the, now that I've shown up, what can I do next? And it doesn't have to be a thing you add to your to-do list. It's really a, how do I want to be? How do I want to show up in my life, in my relationships, attending to whatever's arising? And so even a journal prompt can just be a thought that we can set the space for, some expansiveness there. And of course, our evening conversations, and today's all going to be about mindful motherhood. And Shonda and I have been connected for some time and just have had a beautiful connection since we met, felt very aligned in our purpose and intentions and offerings. I thought she'd be a really great addition to what we're trying to do here in this retreat, which is cultivate satisfaction when we're not where we thought we would be. And there's so many things that can get in the way of that. And part of it is our own damn busyness, our own inability to not slow down, be present, which can make us detached from self, disconnected from others, irritable, frustrated, overwhelmed, you name it, right? So Shonda, please introduce yourself and then we'll just organically let it go. And for those of you who are on live, just so you know, we're gonna finish kind of an official conversation, maybe about 9:45 to the top of the hour, and then open it up for questions. So if you've got questions, keep note, you can pop them in the chat as they arrive, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, great. Hi, Jory. I'm glad to be here. And yeah, I'm on the East Coast, so this is kind of getting close to my bedtime. But for you, Jory, I'm staying awake.
I know I remember when you asked, you're like, well, I have a hard stop of my workday, but I'll give it an exception. I thought, oh, I'm so touched. Thank you for,
yes.
And thank your family for taking you away from them for some a little bit more business at the end of the day.
Oh yeah, they don't mind.
But this is more fun than business.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I am a trained psychotherapist for about 25 years. I've had my own solo practice for almost 25. I have a mindfulness background, yoga. I'm a life balance coach for busy women and an author of 2 books. So I love to have these conversations and see where it goes.
So we have so much in common already. Start by sharing what your books are and lead into what drove you to have this be a focus of your work. What were you noticing in your own life as a mom that really helped you realize we need some more support in this?
Yes. So I have 2 kids and now they're 21. My daughter is studying in England for grad school right now, and my son is 11. He just started middle school, 6th grade. So quite a difference
You're
there.
at different ends of the spectrum, love.
That's right. Yes. He definitely keeps me moving. Sometimes that makes me feel young. Sometimes that not so much. But I started meditating. Let's go way back. I started taking an MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction class. I came across this work when it was first around, and I used it. I was reading about it for therapy, and I thought this is really intriguing. This mindfulness piece, it sort of felt like the heart of therapy that wasn't part of cognitive behavioral therapy, which is more about our thoughts and our behavior. So I wanted to learn more. I enrolled in my local hospital's 8-week class. And I'm a recovering perfectionist, definitely like going to be the star student. So
And,
yeah, raise your
you
hand.
guys can relate to that. You can,
Yes.
just do a gentle nod to all of our recovering perfectionism anonymous meeting.
Yes, exactly. So I was like, okay, I have to do the homework. It's meditating a half an hour every day. My daughter was about 3 at the time. And at the time, I was feeling not as patient with her as I wanted to be. Definitely busy, definitely, kind of stressed and feeling pulled in different directions. And so I thought, okay, well, this is, I'm here really for as a therapist, but let's just see what happens too. So, as we know, very quickly, when I started practicing and meditating a half an hour every day, I really noticed the benefits quickly. I
Mm,
was slowing down just a little bit. And I was like, what? You want me to what? Slow down? Like, no, because I was practicing Ashtanga yoga, which is, very vigorous, very active. It's a moving meditation, but it's moving. So I just sat still for a half an hour, which was, not easy. Um, but I was hooked right away and really noticed those benefits that I was feeling less exhausted. I was feeling more patient, just kind of enjoying things more. And I had more patience, more tolerance.
mhm.
So I started using it in my therapy practice. I was continue to meditate faithfully for a half an hour every day and ended up teaching in that same program at my hospital for about 5 years, went through teacher training, of course, and all of that. So fast forward to the time when I'm pregnant with my son and my daughter's about to turn 10. And I know from experience, there's no way I will be meditating for a half an hour every day with a newborn, right? Forget that. So I was like, okay, how do I keep meditation and mindfulness in my life in a way that's practical and flexible and doable?
Mhm.
So I came up with these 5-minute practices. I thought, okay, this is something I can integrate into my life. And I started teaching it to the women I was working with in my office as a therapist as well. And it was really beneficial for them. So I started to really see how even 1 minute can be
Yeah.
so powerful and radical. And so that ended up being some blog posts that I was sharing with my clients that then I thought, this might be a book. So I figured I would pitch it to some agents and publishers, and Breathe Mama Breathe 5-minute mindfulness for busy moms was born. And
Mm,
so that was that book. And then as my son became a little bit older, going into preschool, early elementary, I'd say late preschool, and I was feeling like, okay, I wasn't completely in the trenches with this toddler running around who needed my constant attention. And I had a little bit more time and I thought, what now? Like, what am I interested in? And I started coming around to more life balance, women's empowerment, and how do I take some of these skills and translate them to women and how
mhm.
stress in general and how we're busy, and particularly working moms as well, working women. And so that became my second book, which is Don't Forget to Breathe 5-minute mindfulness for busy women. And so both of the books have dozens of these, what I call
Mhm.
mindful breaks, these very quick, practical, flexible tools and strategies that we can use to bring a little bit more balance back into our lives.
It's amazing, Shonda, and I can so relate to so much of your story. And except you were a much better student than I was, because when I did a week long MBSR retreat with John Kabat-Zinn and Saki
Yeah.
Santorelli, and in given the instruction to go home and to meditate for 30 minutes a day, I was pretty much like, yeah, fuck that. That's not happening. Like I, I was like, there's got to be a not a more efficient way, but there's got to be a way to meet myself where I was at.
Mm,
And I went on so many mindfulness retreats, and I did, silent meditation retreats. And one of the things that I found, and this was back in 2011, 2012, I remember this one particular, I think it was the silent retreat that I was on. It was a 5-day Buddhist silent meditation retreat. So taking all the precepts meant no eye contact, no reading, no writing, no talking, meditation 16 hours a day. And at the end of it, they said, okay, so be sure to thank the people who helped support you being here. The people who watered your plants, fed your cat, did your job at work. And I'm like, I think I'm the only mom. And I'm like, what
wow.
about the 15 people I needed to enlist to take care of my kids to be gone? What
Whoa.
about the long laundry list, literally, of detailed instruction for what had to happen in my absence? I literally think in this group of like 60 people, now this was in Santa Cruz, it was a little granola, It was earlier on in the, secular mindfulness movement. So it still felt a little fringe. But I remember feeling like, well, where are the people like me?
Mm,
Because to be honest, I need this as a busy mom just as much as the every other person who's here, and possibly even a little bit more so. And not to
mm,
judge everyone's needs for the practice, but really feeling like there's no one who's representing me in this movement.
right. Right. Wow.
And
Yeah.
I
You gave
saw
me
that was
goosebumps when
the,
you said that because that's, yeah. Wow.
and so, these role models of the teachers who are very meditative in nature and slow talking. And, this is hilarious, but I showed up in that retreat, showering every day, like putting on new yoga pants every day. And even the teacher, who is a very well-known, respected meditation teacher, wore the same sweatpants 3 of the 5 days that had a major hole in the butt of the sweatpants. Like, so again, I felt out of place of, wait, but
Yeah.
what about the busy mom who
Yep.
doesn't know how to slow down because I literally don't know how to fit it into my day.
Right.
And 30 minutes is not happening.
Right. Right.
So I had the
Yes.
compassion to say, well, I can do it for a minute.
Right.
So I kind of had the opposite from you, where I started off for a minute and I'm like, ooh, I like that.
Yes.
That
Yes.
felt really good. And by natural desire for more, I, built my meditation practice up.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about the in between, right? And because
Mm,
I think research has in the past 15 years really shifted that we still get the benefits of the brain, even if it's not 30 to 40 minutes a day, which is
right.
what I
Right.
called BS on all that time ago.
Right.
So, wherever you are who's listening, I'm imagining you're here because this is resonating. And so I'm imagining many women are also thinking, Shonda, that's great. You can even do it for 5. I don't even know where I'm going to get 5 extra minutes in my day. So let's
Yes.
talk to like the logistics before we go into the practices of maybe some of the mindset, the belief systems, the perceived or perhaps real barriers that get in the way of being able to create a practice.
Right. Right. So kind of addressing some of the myths that I hear, is that what you're sort of saying that show
Yeah,
up a lot? Yeah. I
yeah.
mean that
Because
the I
I think
can't shut
a
off
lot
my
of times
mind. That kind of
people stop before they start, but especially
yes.
for moms, right? Not just the
Yes.
meditation piece, but
Okay.
I mean, moms can't even go to the bathroom by themselves,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yes. Right. So what I say is it's really important if you can. And sometimes we are very rudely awoken by our children in the morning. And this is not, that's not one of those opportunities. But otherwise, uh, lying in bed or sitting up in bed and putting your hands to your heart and taking 2 deep inhales and exhales. Boom. That's it. You are now checking in with yourself. And if you can, then I add, what am I craving today? What am I needing today? Some days it's like I am craving rest. How can I figure out 1 minute, 5 minutes to get some of that? Sometimes I'm craving movement. Sometimes I'm craving connection with someone. Sometimes I'm craving energy. What is that? And and we may not have an answer. There are some days it's like I don't have a clue. I have no idea. And that's fine too. It's like this practice. So it's just sit up, hands to heart, which reminds us and releases a little of that feel good oxytocin, that connection hormone. And that checking in with myself. This is a kindness for myself. 2 breaths. What am I needing? Doesn't mean I
Yeah.
can immediately get it, but I'm noticing. And sometimes we have to say to ourselves, you know what? I can't do that today. That's not happening this week, but I hear you. I'm listening. I'm paying
Mm.
attention, right? And I'm not swallowing it. I'm paying attention. And I'll get there. I'll figure out a way.
Can I add one piece to that I see a
Yeah.
lot of women get stuck in is the judgment of, but I can't get there today.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
I often say compassion is the opposite of judgment. And so the way that we can respond and attend to our own inner mind and our own response to whatever we checked in and heard, right? To be able to not be like, "Ah, there I go again. See, I can never do this, right? Because that's just going to keep us in a cycle of reactivity in which we're never going to find the compassion, let alone the momentum to do what we could do next. So I just
Right.
want to say, if we can't get to it, be mindful of how we even respond to that.
Yeah. So how would you talk to your best friend, your sister, whatever, it would be with that kind sort of, honey, I know, I hear you. It's one of those weeks and I got you and we'll figure this out, right? Or something. Um, for sure. So it's that brief check-in. And if you have 5 minutes, that's the time when you can do a 5 minute guided meditation or something like that. But very basically, it's just about checking in with ourselves, self-awareness.
Mhm.
That is just a great way to start our day. And then it's throughout the day, sprinkling our day with what I call those mindful breaks, those pauses, reminders to like, just stop what we're doing. And sometimes we can't even stop what we're doing, and that's okay. But it's in that moment, as I'm folding the laundry, or as I'm feeding the baby, or whatever that is, I pause and recognize that I'm there. And I often
Yeah.
use the triangle of awareness, which we use we learn in mindfulness based stress reduction, which is what's up with my thoughts, my body sensations, and my emotions right now. Thoughts,
Mhm.
body sensations, emotions. It's just a great check in, to again assess what's up, what's here. Um, these
And
are
for
those
those who are new
go
to
ahead.
the, I just want to say, for those who are new to this practice and this language, the
Yeah.
self-awareness, because we are in such a doing and
Mm,
productivity culture, the tendency is going to say, but what do I do with those thoughts? But what do I do with those emotions? But what do I do with those sensations? And I want to just make the invitation, nothing.
right.
We're just
Right.
noticing,
Yep.
because the general tendency is to stay so busy that we're not even aware.
Right.
And
Right.
awareness in and of itself is almost enough to be the destination, right?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, completely. And it's this, I almost balk at saying slowing down because it's really hard to think of slowing down, but sort of the pace. I know for myself, I am like a to-do list. Like I love a to-do list and I love to get stuff done and be productive and efficient. Like I just ever since I was a little. And I still do. And so, but I do know there are those days when I am so frantic and everything feels frantic and urgent and time starved that my muscles are tense, that I'm not remembering as clearly. And we know physiologically what's going on in our brains and our bodies at that time. It's true. We really aren't able to think as clearly. And then I'm more exhausted earlier in the evening. And I'm spilling my coffee, dropping where did I leave my keys? That's the time when, if you can take a couple of deep breaths, even while you're moving through all of these things with all of the kids and the chaos, you will send a signal to your brain that there's no fight or flight needed, no immediate danger. So I don't know if you want to go into that at all, or if you've talked to, uh,
Well, yeah, I think this is a great opportunity to do a little brain science 101 and
great.
helping people, because I think sometimes people don't even truly understand the connection of what happens when they're stressed. So I'll start it off with a little bit of the ways that I like to talk about this in real simplistic terms. But I like to start with the relationship between the emotional brain and our executive functioning.
Hmm.
And the reciprocal relationship there is when our emotional brain fires off, it literally shuts off connectivity to our executive functioning. So it's kind of like the Wi-Fi went off, you just can't log on. Another way of saying it is, when our emotional brain is not activated, which means we're not stressed, overwhelmed, anxious, tired, depressed, angry, you name it, whatever might make you feel activated, right? The connectivity to accessing your tools, your logic, reason, rationality, language, communication, learning, remembering information, making decisions. When our brain's calm, we can access those tools like it's a 4-lane open highway with no traffic. No problem. But when that emotional brain fires off and takes over, it just shuts off that connectivity,
Hmm.
which is why you get more irritable, you get frustrated quicker, you're not going to be able to think clearly, make decisions, communicate clearly. Everything's going to feel off kilter.
Mm,
And so,
yes.
one of the ways when that emotional brain is activated is we breathe. And it's like, oh, that actually brings our executive functioning back online.
Yep.
But the other part of it is the physiological component, right? The way that our brain perceives, real or perceived, it's a threat, right? That we are now in fight, flight, freeze. So now our physiological symptoms, sensations, everything is heightened because our body is being prepared to go run or fight the bear in the cave.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Right. So as simple and sort of too simplistic as it sounds to take those deep breaths, when we start to practice it, we see how effective it really is in, in counteracting fight, flight, or freeze, where our executive functioning, that planning, being able to step back and see the big picture and problem solve, like you're saying with our kids. So when our 2-year-old's having a meltdown and we are tired and exhausted and stressed, we tend to react, to yell, to behave in the ways that are not effective or not as skillful as we'd like them to be. And so when we can take a breath or two, and the more we're doing this, the more it's just becoming a habit. It's becoming something we've done so many times. It's almost like that muscle memory. We pull it out and be like, oh yeah, I have the breath. That's right. And just that one or two breaths to say, and it gives us also perspective. We can be like, okay, this is not the end of the world, even though in the moment it's feeling like it, and I need to do something about it, but we choose our response, right? So that's
Yeah.
so, so powerful. And, I always talk about the other side of that coin is with these simple pauses, we are able to recognize and notice and savor more of the beautiful moments that we tend to miss, those really ordinary moments with our kids that it's not the Disneyland, it's not the big birthday party, it's just like sitting next to them in bed reading a book and you're like,
Yeah.
wow, I feel this, and again, you can use that triangle. This is what I feel in my body. My heart space feels kind of warm, my body feels relaxed. I feel my son, his body next to me. My emotions are joy and gratitude and love. And the thoughts are like, oh, I do love this. He's getting so big. This is not I know how this is
Yeah.
going to go. So very quickly we could get pulled out of that. And in parenting, Brene Brown talks about foreboding joy, which
Mm-hmm.
is like, oh my gosh, I love him so much. He's so amazing. What if something happens to him? Oh no, I can't do it. Like we go there so fast, but we can gently bring ourselves back to and just try to savor that. That really locks in that memory. And
Yeah.
we can access that anytime, right? I can sit here and think about that and feel some of that warmth and love, as you can when your daughters are not right next to you either.
Yeah. And another thing I want to add to this brain piece, and then we can go into maybe some other practices and some examples of what it looks like in practices, because I have some fun stories that might be helpful for those who are listening, or for all of you guys who are watching this and listening. But when we talk about quieting that emotional brain, another way that science has shown can help us get our tools back online and quiet that emotional activation is by simply naming it. And this is so overly simplified, but just simply saying, wow, I'm really overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
Even that is almost enough to help us create some distance, to give us some perspective, because now once we have some perspective, we're like, oh, okay, now I can breathe. Right. So if you might not be able to access the breath first, name it.
Yes.
We know from Dan Siegel, the whole name it to tame it, which is overly simplified again, but this is actually research-based tools to help us in the moment. And more importantly, we can do this in front of our kids. And this
Mm.
is what I was going to share, was how I would role model this in real time to my daughters. So a lot of this didn't have to be on my meditation cushion, separate
Oh
away
yeah.
when I was quiet and alone. This was like in the height of bedtime, nighttime chaos.
Yes. Yes.
And one of my favorite examples, and I'd love to hear some of what you have, but there was one night my kids were probably about 7 and 9, somewhere around there. And my ex-husband always worked late, so I was always doing the whole evening myself, or often, I should say. And they just weren't getting in the bath. And by like 8 o'clock, I used to be like, okay, mama's got to clock out because, my work day is done. Mama's clocking out. So you guys need to go to bed because now it's time for me. And I didn't want that
Yes.
to be impinged upon because I needed that at the end of the day. And they just weren't getting in the bath. And I started to raise my voice. And I had the awareness of, I'm raising my voice. That doesn't feel good to me. That's not going to feel good to them. But most importantly, it's not going to solve the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So I literally just named it compassionately, that tone of voice. wow, you guys, I'm really getting overwhelmed. I feel like my blood is starting to boil. I feel like I'm getting tense in my, so I named the physiology, right? Role
Yes.
model like this. I'm really beginning to get frustrated. So you know what? I don't want to say something I don't mean. So I'm just going to stop and take a deep breath. And as they're acting all chaotic, I said this and then I just literally closed my eyes.
They're like, what's happening to mommy right now? I'm scared.
And I just sat there taking 3 deep breaths. But the most fascinating thing happened. When I did that, I felt better, but it shifted their energy.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was done, I'm like, okay, I'm calm. I'm not going to react. I don't need to raise my voice. And then I simply said, okay, what do we have to do to get in the bath?
Mm.
And then, Shonda, the most amazing thing happened ever. They got in the bath.
Right, right.
So I love that story. And it's not always going to work that way, but it's a great reminder of in real time to do
Yes.
this.
Yes.
Do you have
Oh,
any
yeah.
similar examples?
Yeah, well, I guess what comes up for me that I think is important to talk about is that was so skillful and a great telling of how when we're on or can catch it, how it works. And I talk about so there are times where I've been like, yeah, look at me. I just did that too, like something like that. And I'm like, wow, okay, great. Then there are the times where it's like, I've lost it. I screamed, and I like to talk about that. I think it's so important for
It's a,
moms to, or
yes.
parents to hear because, we've all been there and it feels awful. And the difference between shame and guilt. And we can get stuck in that shame cycle of, oh my God, like I've ruined them. I'm a terrible mom. I can't do this, and on and on and on and on. And if we're talking about that triangle of awareness right now, bringing that in again, the thought is, I can't believe I did this. I'm terrible. Lump in my throat is the body sensation, a sinking feeling in my stomach. The emotion is like guilt and just, ugh, I don't know. I don't, better word than ugh, right?
Yeah.
And then the next thought is like, this is just like I'm horrible, whatever. And we spin around, and we can get stuck in that shame. And the difference between shame and guilt, and shame is I am a bad mother, and guilt is that was really like unhelpful. Like I did not like how I just behaved right there. It's about the behavior, right? Guilt is about the behavior, and shame is about who I am as a person or a mother. And when we say that to ourselves, like I'm a horrible mother, I'm a terrible mother. I mean, I get bad goosebumps when I say that because it just feels so bad. I don't know.
Yeah.
And because that's like the opposite of what we want probably most in this world, right? Is we want to be good parents, whatever
Yeah.
that means, good enough. So I just want to normalize number one, that I think sometimes we all lose it. It's, the best we can
Absolutely.
do then is like you're saying, name it like, oh, I'm feeling a ton of guilt. I'm feeling really embarrassed. I'm feeling just awful about myself right now. Okay. And let yourself feel that with some compassion as best we can. Normalize everybody, even the mindfulness people, teachers have done this, right? So,
Oh, yeah.
yes. And then what do I need to do to repair that? And that's going to look different, but that's the next really, really important piece, which is, like then bringing in kind of what you're saying, which is like, honey, I am so sorry. I was tired. It's no excuse. I felt myself. I didn't catch it in time. I could have taken a couple of deep breaths to calm myself
Hmm.
down or go taking a break. I didn't. I'm sorry. I'm going to work on that for next time. Will you
Yeah.
forgive me? Still mad at you because you're whatever. But yeah. So
It's a really important point to counteract. And thank you for sharing that because I, I see so many people getting stuck in the shame spiral of the not enoughness
mm,
and the fear of what does that mean? And those are likely old stories just coming up, right? Old narratives, old traumas that have not been fully resolved, or even traumas that have been healed and repaired and resolved, and yet still are in our embedded in our nervous system,
mm,
right? And the key, what you said there, is the repair.
mm,
And how can we then do a little bit of a redo? Wow, like you said, I didn't catch it in time because I think the point of what we're both saying is that really one of the keys here, and I'd like to bridge this into some of the practices to help, I was able to do that because I had had years of practice to get to that point. Just so for
Yes.
you listening, that did not happen when I'm like, oh, mindfulness, meditation, breathe, got it, check, done. No, that was an established practice that I was able to draw upon in the height of the moment. But being able to role model it and even role model the repair. And I think part of the balance for moms is recognizing I can do this with my kids. I can do this
Yes. Yes.
around my kids. I don't have to be alone for 30 minutes at 5 a.m.
Right.
So let's maybe transfer into some of the actual practices for both the busy moms, but just life balance in general that,
Mm,
you don't have to be a mom to benefit from these tools.
right.
And I think there's not a single person who's here who's not saying, I need more balance. I'm overwhelmed. There's too much going on. I don't have time for me. Why does it all matter? Like it just is like this snowball that just gathers more and more narrative that just causes more and more overwhelm.
Right. Right. So I guess let me share a few specific to parenthood, or one or two, and then we can kind of move on to life balance, because I think, depending where we are in our parenting journey, it's sometimes we like, I call it being in the trenches, but it's often when like you have more than, even if you have one, because I felt like I was in the trenches with one. My daughter was a little tough, but just that the thick of it, where it's like that's pretty all consuming for a number of
Mhm.
years or time, and different phases, I would say too. Uh, so using that triangle tune in to check in, using it for those challenging moments, using it for the beautiful moments. I'm going to say too, so perfectionism and comparisonitis. I mean, I think I kind of was alluding to that, mentioned that a little bit about thinking that we're the only ones, or just normalizing that we all have these really tough times where we feel like, I don't know what I'm
Yeah.
doing. I did not do that well at all. I'm not doing very well with this right now. Or I think for me as a perfectionist type A is that like helpless. I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. I think sitting with that can be really, really uncomfortable and hard. So to just again normalize, like you're saying, to name that and say, like, it is okay. And it's to be expected. Um,
Yeah.
and and noticing when we are, I mean, we've talked about, I'm sure, everybody hears about social media and comparing ourselves, but really paying attention to everything you're taking in when it comes to media, social media, friends, interactions, and what do I walk away feeling not great about myself, and how can I kind of be conscious of that?
Yeah.
And to recognize that you're comparing yourself to their outside and it's your inside, and they're not seeing your experience, and you're not seeing their experience. It's curated. So
Yeah.
that piece for sure. Um, and coming back to throughout your day, taking a few of those deep breaths and just checking in with yourself. So, as you are preparing food, or as you are driving in the car, if you're driving somewhere to the store or work or wherever you're going, instead of having a podcast or the radio on, what about silence for a couple of minutes, and noticing that, and noticing, is this super uncomfortable? Do you have that impulse to turn something on and busy your mind? So drop your shoulders, I always relax your brow, that whatever you need to do, and just notice what's here. Um,
Can I
and
interject on that piece?
yeah.
It's such an important piece, but there's two things I want to say. One is I actually began my meditation practice in my car
Mm,
because of the whole like I don't have 30 minutes. Well, what do I have?
yeah.
Well, I have about 20 minutes a day, 3 days a week that I'm in the car by myself.
Yeah.
That was available time that I could choose to use intentionally.
Mhm.
Obviously, I kept my eyes open,
Right.
but it was really about turning off the radio, putting down the phone, connecting with my breath, tuning into my surroundings, paying actual attention because I could drive that route with my eyes closed.
Yeah.
And that was also the parallel of how I was living my life.
Right.
And
Autopilot.
so,
Yeah.
recognizing that we can use available time to us was really revolutionary for me to be like, oh, I can do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think,
And the piece
go
that
ahead.
you also just I wanted to add is the discomfort that many people experience as a result of sitting with themselves.
Mm.
So can you just add on to a little bit more of that? Because that can often be a deterrent from people wanting to do this more. They're like, oh, that felt shitty. I'm not doing that again. Why would I do this? It's supposed to make me feel good. I feel like crap now. Like all this discomfort of what, in that aloneness that we often purposely keep ourselves busy to not feel.
Oh, completely. And I think when you're not practiced at sitting or just getting quiet for a minute or two, there can be a lot of fear. Like it's unconscious. We don't even recognize there's anxiety and fear around what happens if just stop what I'm doing and pay attention to what is going on in my mind. Completely. So yeah, to recognize that all kinds of things can show up, but to recognize too that when we start to do this and notice, we recognize how resilient we are, how
Mm,
much we can ride that wave. We can feel something really intense. I remember having, like I said, my daughter was really a tough kid in terms of like highly sensitive and some anxiety, OCD, and panic attacks. And there were some really intense times that I felt really, really intensely emotional and out of control, like not out of control, but just helpless, let's say. And I
mhm.
don't know what to do. And it felt extremely unpleasant. But if I could just even pay attention to just take a breath and just remind myself with a mantra or something like, this is going to pass. This is going to pass. You're going to do this, like moment to moment kind of thing. Because sometimes we know it. Of course, we know it's going to change, but we don't know it in that moment. It feels so intense. I write
Mhm.
in Breathe Mama Breathe about my son not wanting to go to preschool. It was like 3 mornings a week. It was more for him to socialize and like he just bawled his eyes out and begged me
Mm.
the entire like 6 minutes, and I know it was 6 minutes, was a very, very long 6 minutes to the preschool every day, and we're just like, "Please, mommy, please, I promise I will be good. I will stay
Aw,
home. I won't
sweet
bother you when you're
boy.
trying to work." Like, and I was just like, so but that 6 minutes was super intense. So, of course, a lot of times we're experiencing a lot more intense, if our kids are sick or, other things. So just to recognize I can do this. This is passing. Um, you know, we build that experience that we know we can draw upon. Like I've been through hard things. I can do this. And
Yeah.
build that tolerance. Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah, I love that saying of, you have 100% success rate of getting through everything you never thought you could.
yes. Yep. Here to tell about it, right? And I guess one more this is for everyone. It's not just parenting, but I do talk about it in the Breathe Mama Breathe is I get to versus I have to. And I've even just the past few weeks, we were talking a little bit before we hopped on here about just kind of the fullness of these weeks and adjustment back to
Mhm.
school. And I found myself being like, I have to, I have to, I have to. And I was like, whoa, look at you. And I did not like that. And it didn't feel good. So starting to consciously say to myself, I get to, which sometimes you're like, really, I'm going to call BS on that. Like, I get to change a diaper again, but kind of, yeah, kind of, yeah, because as we know, you know, it's not forever. And we have these precious kids who can drive us batty, but we're lucky. So yeah.
On that note, it just tugged at my heartstring because literally right before we got on this call, I just got home from taking my youngest daughter to her very last pediatrician appointment ever.
Oh,
And I just had to hug the pediatrician like goodbye to say
oh,
thank you for 20 years of service. Like you walked into my hospital room moments after my daughter was born.
mm,
And she, this was her 17-year-old well check. So at her 18th, she has aged out and like, wow, like there's a beginning, middle, and end to all of it, to all the good moments, all the hard
mm.
moments, all the moments you're never going to think are going to end. And it goes by so fast. And it was like, wow,
In
that was it.
retrospect. In
That was it,
retrospect,
right. And
yes.
so, we can't always get that perspective in the moment.
Yeah,
And that's also the nature of life, the nature of the beast. And sometimes, so, you know,
yeah.
That can
Yeah.
sometimes be a gratitude of, with this hard moment, I'm grateful this ride to preschool is only 6 minutes long.
Yes,
It
exactly.
could be 20 minutes of chaos. It's
Yeah.
only six. So
Yes, exactly. And I remember, on the other side of that, I remember sitting on the floor playing Legos or Barbies and being like, "Oh, how many more times do I have to be playing with Barbie?" I know Barbie's back, but or whatever. Um, monotony and boredom, so I was like, "Can we I don't know, just something I like to throw a ball
oh,
or something." I
playing
don't know.
Uno or
Yeah,
sorry for
yeah.
hours on end.
Monopoly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
So the same balance that we can breathe into our day to help us be more present in our motherhood really speaks to them, this life balance. This is kind of a big question. Do you believe actually in life balance?
Yes. Yeah, so, to me, I actually get frustrated. I hear so many people say there's no such thing. It's a bunch of BS. It's not, it's not possible, but I think it is. And I think it's my definition is it's this gentle, ongoing recalibration of our priorities over time, which
Say that
I, d-
again, because you said it in
yeah,
our IG live, and I just love the definition. So please say it again.
yeah, this gentle, ongoing recalibration of our priorities over time. So it's ever evolving. Life will throw so much at us and we don't have the opportunity to decide what that is a lot of the time, but we have a choice in how we respond and how we recalibrate the balance. And it can be, fun and playful and experimental because I think people will say like, again, more to do on my to-do list or, there's no perfect balance. Well, yeah, there is no perfect balance. It's more about in this phase of my life, in this season of my life, and even in this moment or day, what feels a little bit more towards balance. And that's what I work on. So again, we're going to bring in that self-awareness piece. We're practicing checking in with ourselves first thing in
Yeah.
the morning. What are we craving? What are we needing? And then I talk about three different types of mindful breaks that help us restore balance. And the first is the breathe breaks, which is like sometimes I am needing a little bit of calm. I am needing a little bit of like centering and like gathering myself. Then there are becoming breaks, which is like I need a little confidence or assertiveness. If we're given a promotion and we're feeling that imposter syndrome, or we're moving into a new phase in our
Mhm.
parenting and we're like, I have no idea how to deal with a teenager, whatever. We pull out one of those becoming breaks and it can help us deal a little bit more in those moments to restore balance. And then there are balance breaks when it comes to how do we assess and bring ourselves back more into balance on different continuums, because there are so
Yeah.
many different continuums that I see, whether we're, some of us like to play it safe, we're risk averse. And some of us are risk takers or we're more impulsive, and kind of knowing again, the more we're checking in with ourselves, we're aware of who we are, our behaviors, how we react in situations. So it's like, okay, if I'm risk averse and I like to play it safe and not step out of my comfort zone, how can I nudge myself on a regular basis more intentionally towards center here on this continuum? And so forth. So it can be fun and playful. And, then as we start to see these tiny little shifts that are intentional, uh, they start to really create this growth. And I call it this upward spiral of growth because,
Hmm.
there are times where, again, we're cruising along and we're feeling like I kind of got this. And then boom, something happens, a big life event and throws us way off course. And we're like, we're screeched to a halt here. Okay. Gotta regroup. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I love those, Shonda. And I wrote down your definition, and language is so powerful. And I'm looking at, that definition of balance, and every single word is so important in that.
Mm,
And I just want to go back before talking about the three breaks, because those are really helpful and really speak to different aspects of ourself, right?
mm,
Am I calming my nervous system? Am I building up my sense of self, or my kind of, the word that came to me is like my personhood, right?
yeah.
Or the balance is like what's around me, right? So there's like this
Mm,
internal, external surrounding. At least that's how I interpreted that. But the gentle ongoing, I really am called to go back to this. The gentle piece, our tendency is to be really harsh on ourselves.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'm good at that too. Yeah. For
right?
sure.
Like,
Yeah.
to shame or blame ourselves into
Mm,
submission of a changed behavior.
mm,
And the gentle piece, like, wow, that's an invitation. Can I do this more gently?
yes.
What would gentle look like? Is it a tone of
Right.
voice? Even the tone of voice I speak to myself in my own mind, right? Is it one of judgment or compassion? Is it one of, criticism, or is it one of kindness?
Yeah.
The ongoing, I think, is a really big part of that, because people are like, well, I already did that. Aren't I done? It's like, well, yeah. And now, hello again. This is now this moment. It's now again, right?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. And wouldn't that be boring if we were done? I mean, sometimes it sounds like
Yeah.
kind of exciting. It sounds really soothing, but for the most
But
part,
like,
that would be
even a
boring.
vacation, you want to get back home to routine, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
even, and then the recalibration, it's a really great word, because I'm very visual. So to
Mm,
recalibrate, I literally see things in balance, right? It's
yeah.
like, oh, this is tipping too much this way,
Yep.
versus let me just get back to this equilibrium that I get to define. Actually, it's not some arbitrary
Oh,
definition of
yeah.
someone else's.
Yes.
Um,
And it will be different, next year, what that looks like too.
right.
Yeah.
And the priorities, what jumped out about that word for me was in James Clear's book Atomic Habits. He talks about how there's actually, we only have one priority. Priority in and of its essence is a singular thing, because otherwise, if there's two, then we can't actually have two priorities. But over time, they're going to shift. And I
Mm,
think, I talk about this in values work. Sometimes we
mm,
have competing values, but they're still both your value, but you can really
yeah.
only be enacting really one thing at a time. You can
Yeah.
only attend to one thing at a time. But the over time pieces, that's going to shift. And maybe over time is 5 minutes ago to 5 minutes from now.
Yeah.
But over time doesn't have to necessarily be seasons of our life or ages or stages of our own development or our kids' ages and stages of development. So I have to really go back and honor the language of that definition of balance, because there's so much in that really speaks to me. And I'm hoping that for you listening, you really got the implication of, okay, with that definition, balance is possible.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I can just think of a real quick example of that, just kind of a day-to-day one is, we're having if we're having one of those weeks or two where it feels like I'm overscheduled and I feel like, I haven't had a really I don't want to say deep, but sort of just like really devoted conversation with my 11-year-old. So doesn't mean like, oh, it's deep and introspective, but more just like looking eye to eye where we sit down and kind of
Intentional.
relaxed, intentional. Yeah, exactly. Or something like that. Or I haven't had like fun with him like a week or so. It's just been so packed in. Then I get that feeling of like, oh, I kind of miss him. It's off, right? So it's like that inkling. It's that like, okay, I've been paying attention. I noticed this. Okay, and I don't need to judge myself for it. It is what it is. Okay, now what? What is that one tiny step? So I might say, okay, it can't happen till next Sunday, but next Sunday we are not doing anything on the schedule, or we're going for a hike together, or whatever that is. That again, it doesn't have to be immediate, but it's I'm paying attention. I got
Mhm.
you, and we'll figure this out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. And those mindful breaks, the breathe, the becoming, and the balance, we can do that in like just a few seconds, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's the framework of the second book, Don't Forget to Breathe, so that there are dozens of these breaks that you can choose from to say, like, okay, what am I craving and needing? A breathe break or a becoming or a balance. And you can kind of page through and see these very short breaks as tools and strategies.
I love it all so much, Shonda. And I know that for all of the listeners, there's so much to take away from this. So I would love to open it up to any questions. I know there's a few of us on live. I actually have some questions that people have submitted to me who weren't able to make it live. But I'll first see if anyone who is live has a question. If not, I'll go into some of the ones that have been sent over to me. And in the meantime, I just want to say thank you so much for your time and the work that you do. I wish you were there leading my MBSR, well, John Kabat-Zinn was great, but so my other retreats.
Just John Kabat-Zinn.
Can I tell a hilarious story about that really quick? When we
Yeah.
were it was a 7-day retreat, and this memory came up, and I hadn't thought about this in years. We were doing a body scan meditation, and John Kabat-Zinn does like a really long body scan.
Uh-huh.
He's like, right, like the guy to be doing this. and there was 150 people in the room, and we were kind of lying like sardines. It was tight quarters, and everyone's lying down, and John Kabat-Zinn is he's and he's like the grandfather of mindfulness. For those who don't know who he is, he really took this Eastern practice into Western science and developed MBSR, and so he's giving it, and within the first couple of breaths, somebody in the room got the giggles.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say snoring because that always happens too, but no, the giggles.
Someone got the giggles, and giggles are contagious.
Oh, yeah, I can't do that.
And then it was like, oh my God, are we allowed to laugh while John Kabat-Zinn is like leading this meditation? And, the essence of mindfulness is to allow whatever's arising to exist
Yeah.
without judgment. And so for 25 minutes, the entire room was in a rupture of laughter.
Oh my
It
gosh, that
was
sounds
such a
amazing.
moment of pure joy to
Yeah.
not be like, nope, we don't have time for laughing. We're supposed to
Right,
be
right.
doing a body scan because I'm on a schedule and we have to attend to all the things that my ego said I have to, accomplish today.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, that's awesome. I wish I would have been there for that.
Oh my God, it was incredible. So I'm going to go ahead and ask one of the questions that I know was submitted to me in preparation for this call. There's many moms in particular who have an intention for a very mindful presence of their own self, their own energy, and ideally the home environment to be able to transfer that to the benefit of the kids, right? What would you say to those who maybe don't have supportive partners
Mm,
who either aren't supportive of the meditative space, if you're physically taking time out of your day to create space for that stillness, but who really aren't interested in learning a more mindful response? How would you
yeah.
speak to those people who don't really feel support by their partners who are really trying for this in their home?
Yeah, yeah, that's challenging and yet totally doable. It's modeling, hoping. Well, there can be some hope there, but really with the intention of just I'm doing this for myself, the kids, and it's contagious. Our emotions are contagious. We know this. So we have mirror neurons. And so, the more calm and sort of attuned I am, the more my kids will be. And your partner has to feel some of that, whether they like it or not or want to
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge it or not. So there is some of that sort of ripple effect. I think just saying this is what sharing your experience. This is how it is for me, and not trying to push too much. If you're ever
Mm-hmm.
interested, I can. But you're also kind of modeling it for them and your kids along the way, and just they will start to notice. I think that you are more calm, more able to choose your response in situations, less reactive. I mean, if you are kind of practicing this, and I mean practicing that very loosely, but if you're intentionally bringing this in on a daily basis and that's your
Mm-hmm.
intention, you will see a difference and they will see a difference. And so
Yeah.
that's appealing.
Yeah. And I would also add to that to let it be okay that that may not be their journey.
Yeah.
And that, I've always said it takes two people to create a pattern, one person to break it.
Mm.
I had a client when I had created a mindfulness course in my community, gosh, like 14 years ago now. And there was a woman who was in her 70s who was really tired of the argumentative style of communication she and her husband had had for 45 years.
Mm.
And she said, I'm no longer available for that kind of energy.
Right.
And so she was really good at her mindfulness practice, and he would start to argue, as was their pattern, and she just wouldn't engage, which only made him more pissed.
Yeah, I'm
And
sure.
that's where I would say, like, that's fine if he wants to continue to respond that way, and you're not available to engage in that pattern
Right.
anymore. And I
Right.
think over time, eventually, he kind of was like, oh, that's not getting any momentum.
Right.
This is just my habit. I don't know what else to do. Right. So that was an interesting experience. That
Yeah.
made me think about when I got this question submitted to me. So
Yeah.
another question that we'll wrap up here. So this has been my experience both personally and professionally. So when this question got asked, and I'm like, oh, I know this is going to be spot on. Do you role model this to your kids and tell your kids, just take a deep breath? And they're like, not going to work. So what would you say to those who are really wanting to role model these mindful breaks, these balance breaks, this ideology, whose kids, maybe they're tweeners or, just, sassy elementary age kids who just feel like eye roll, that's not going to work, it doesn't work. So what would you say might be a path around, or just a mindful response to, in ideally, and maybe it's similar to the question before about the partner, but specifically, what would you say to a kid who's like, yeah, breathing's not going to help, I tried, not working?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess ideally we get them when they're young, when they're playful, when we can kind of bring it in a way that's, we're not necessarily explaining what we're doing. We're just doing it with them, and it's fun. But if you've got a tween or a teen, who's very skeptical. Um, I would say with my kids, they've both really experienced it when they've had times of stress, when they were feeling overwhelmed or stressed or had a difficult moment. And it wasn't like, I'm like, ooh, now's my opportunity to teach this. But it's sort of like, this is a tool I have at my disposal. And I am helping them to just, okay, this is what we need to do. And if they're amenable to it, you can do a 3 breath hug or longer, which is just like hugging them and kind of coordinating your breaths together and slowing down the breath. So like kind of just getting them calm if they're in that kind of a place. But sometimes if they're skeptical, it's like when we're really needing it, when we're really struggling
Mhm.
and we see the effectiveness of it, we're kind of like, oh yeah, that kind of worked, or
Yeah,
even like at bedtime, I'm having trouble falling asleep. So, um, let's just, what if we just try this guided meditation? What's the worst thing that's going to happen, and whatever, like that kind of, but definitely not forcing, definitely not, making them, they need to come to it
right. One of the
voluntarily.
things that I've often worked with clients around, and actually have done with my own kids, you know, it's a good reminder. The last thing anyone's ever going to do when you tell them to calm down is actually calm down.
Right.
So, if you have a tantruming child, no matter how old they are, to tell them to take a breath might not be the most skillful response, because they're literally not in a place to hear you.
Yep.
Because remember, your emotional brain hasn't been fired off yet. Theirs is. So you're talking with logic and reason about how to solve the problem of emotional overwhelm, but they can't even access that to see that as a helpful tool.
Mm,
So really being mindful that they may not even be able to access their breath if they're tantruming, which we know will help, and not always going to be able to access it. So one of the ways I would answer that question would be to observe without
mm,
judgment. I'm noticing,
mm,
this is kind of slightly different than the question, but I would add on to it. I'm noticing you're having a really hard time catching your breath.
mm.
And you know what? Me just watching this is beginning to feel overwhelmed. I feel like my heart rate is starting to get increased, and I'm beginning to feel some frustration. So you know what I'm going to do? Kind of like
Mm.
what I told you in my example earlier, and
Yeah.
become a surrogate breather for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because even just your breath and their presence, like, fine, you don't have to breathe. You know what? Keep screaming. That's totally fine. But you know what? I'm
Mhm.
going to breathe.
Right. Right.
And because, like you said, that we've got those mirror neurons, it's going to shift the energy. So, I know there's a lot of frustrated, skeptical teens or tweens or even younger kids, which causes, frustrated parents with like, but this will help.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes it's got to be the in is when they're really having a hard time and then can see the benefit of it. If you
Yeah.
can. Yeah.
Yeah. For little kids, I always liked, when I was a school counselor, I always had bubbles, and the bubbles from Gymboree were always the best to blow bubbles, because it gives them the ability to have a longer
Yeah.
exhale. And we know that the longer exhale is going to help activate the calming part of the brain, the opposite of the fight, flight, freeze. And so it would be like a test of, if you were to blow the bubbles really quick and fast,
Yep.
right, that's not going to be the activating calming part of the brain. So it would be like, how big can you get it to be, and how many can
Yeah.
come out? So you make some games out of that bubble breath to get them into the physiological sensation of deep breathing.
Yeah. Or even just blow. Can you blow really long and slow up my face? And like, can you try to make my hair move back or that kind of thing if they're willing to do that with you? But exactly that long, slow exhale.
One of the things I used to do as a school counselor, I would actually do body scans with the kids, and they
Mm,
loved the body scans. But in a way, because a lot of kids I saw, I was doing this as young as preschoolers at the school I was at, didn't like the instruction, take a deep breath, because they would, right?
oh,
They sound
yeah.
like they would sound like Darth Vader. So I would bring in this big bucket of Beanie Babies, And I would have them
Them
put
on their
a stuffed
bellies. Yeah.
animal on their tummy and have them just not even give an instruction and just say, notice what happens.
Yeah.
Oh, well, what's happening? Oh, it's going up and down. Why is it doing that? Oh, because I'm breathing. Oh, wow, that's so cool. Can you keep doing that?
Yeah.
And now we're tricking them, but
Yeah.
the tweens might
Totally.
not really appreciate the go lie down and put a beanie baby on your tummy.
Well, or you're when you're a tween, you still have that like little security something usually. And even though you're embarrassed about it when you would be with your friends, you can still, lie in bed and put that on your chest or your belly. Yeah.
Or if you're my kids at 17 and 20 who still have theirs, and if you're me at 45, I still have mine. You're never too old
Okay,
for
there you
a
go.
stuffed animal or a security blanket, because we all need that comfort.
Yes.
Shonda, I so valued this conversation, and I'm sure everyone who's going to tune into the replay or listen to it live right now has gotten so much from it. I mean, this is the work I do, and I still learn new things from you. So thank you so much for your time and balancing out your own boundaries of your night and time to share into the Journey Forward community. Can you share how people can find you? And, I know that the free giveaways we have offered through the retreat had some meditations. And on the final day on Friday, we're doing a raffle for one of your books. But how can people find you and learn more?
Yeah, sure. It's shondamoralis.net, and that's ShondaMoralis.net. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, my books, anywhere books are sold. And I do have a new Breathe Mama Breathe mini mindfulness course for new moms. And it's a $49 price point. And I say that just because it's a very low price point, but it's used as a gift certificate that you can give to new moms, that you can gift them
Brilliant.
right through email. And it's just these very short practices, short videos, that they can come back to and use again and again.
I love that. So anyone who's got a baby shower to go to,
Right.
this is an amazing gift that will not just help the mom, but help the whole family culture.
Right.
And, I think this is really something to point out is when we practice this, it's not just benefiting us, but we really are shifting the entire culture of our home and our families and the relationships of those around us. Even if they're resistant, it's still going to make impact.
That's right, for sure.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. And tomorrow morning will be morning practices, meditation, journal prompts. And tomorrow evening, we've got Zach Watson, who's going to be talking about equity in relationships, the mental, emotional, and domestic load that can really interfere with connected partnerships and what we can do about that. So, all right, everyone, take care and be well. Thanks for tuning in.
Bye,
Thanks again,
Jory.
Shonda.
Thank you.